thanks everyone for joining us today, and a special thank you to Byron Woods for taking time today. What we're going to talk about is how innovative facilities teams are changing the game. What does that mean? It means accessing information when you need it in the field. Let's face it, your facilities teams are not tied to a desk. So when they're in the field, being able to access their critical building information to do their job. So let's jump in. Shifting gears in facilities management, what we're going to talk about is these specific things here, and that's the new norm. Retiring workers in the current labor shortage, getting new hires trained and up to speed fast. Also finding critical building information and equipment. Emergency preparedness and response, and then also updating changes moving forward as your building evolves. So let's jump in here and talk about the new norm. So we're just coming out of COVID. We've had social distancing. We've had COVID testing requirements, vaccine requirements, also quarantine areas, also custodial and cleanliness. Hygiene's never been more important. And that includes your hand sanitizer stations, electrostatic sprayers, all the other things, even UV lighting inside of HVAC units to potentially kill some of the virus. Also air quality, and then also remote work. That's never been more important than we've seen, or more timely than we've seen today. So Byron, tell us a little bit about the new things and some of that new norm within College of Sequoias.
You covered it here on the list. A couple of things that I, really oversee in the custodial department is electrostatic sprayers, of course. That's a new method for us. We use microfiber cleaning methods, and then all the PPE. So you got gloves, you have the hand sanitizer stations. And, you're talking about technology and how we're using technology in the workplace for the custodial, from the custodial aspect. We installed all, I don't know how many hand sanitizer dispensers, probably, a few hundred throughout the district. And what I've realized is, how do I know where all of them are at? And so that's something that I've used technology to be able to inventory the location of all of those. Air quality. We've improved our air quality, HVAC filtration, using UV lighting, as well as a technology called iWave. And both of those, again, that's more equipment that's added to our systems, but it's all about where it's located and finding it and keeping track of it. And so we've also used technology to be able to map that so that any of our staff can be able to find all those.
Gotcha. And I remember when I was on site there one time, we were talking about, you'd even covered up some of the door sensors to eliminate traffic going two-way through the door sensors. Talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so we were trying to direct traffic, enter here, exit here. So a trick that we did on the automatic doors, we actually just put a piece of tape on the outside sensor, so the door still operated from the inside only to let people out. So it's just kind of a little clever way to handle things.
Hey, things from the field that worked, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the remote aspect.
Yeah, so remote, when the pandemic hit, of course, we went down to bare bones across the board. So my department, we have custodial, grounds, maintenance, transportation, warehouse. So there's about just over 40 staff throughout 3 campuses. So we went to bare bones staff. Of course, custodial and maintenance are always there. But we got to the point where I myself was also switching off with some of our other managers. I'd be working on site, 3 days a week. Someone else would be working on site 3 days a week. And what we realized was, we needed a way to be able for me to actually communicate to other staff that are on site when I'm remote. And technology was the key. And we were able to implement a system to where we could inventory a lot of our systems, our equipment. And then if anything came up, I was off site, I'd be able to pull it up on my device. It's all cloud-based, and I could communicate through an issue to staff that are on site at any time.
Yeah, I know especially with your campuses, having 3 campuses, I forget the distance between the main campus of Azalea and what it was, Hanford, is it 25 miles?
Yeah, so we have Hanford is about 20 miles away, and then we have Tulare, which is about 10.
Yeah, and I can imagine that it was critical for you guys to be able to respond, especially on a skeleton crew, to get from one campus to to the other campus and in not just a timely manner, but take the stuff you need when you're on your way there.
Well, absolutely. And the fact that our maintenance staff, we only have one maintenance person per trade. So we only have one HVAC technician. We have one skilled maintenance worker. We have a painter / skilled maintenance, one electrician and one plumber to cover all three campuses. So when they're off that day, when the pandemic hits and we're on bare bones crew, they're only working maybe 3 days a week. Well, in those other days that they should be there, that they're not, some of us have to step up and handle any issues that arise.
They do whatever it takes, right?
Exactly.
Let's jump over to the next slide here. Let's talk about the impact of retiring workers and the current labor shortage. So how is this impacting colleges Sequoias with these?
We had, within the last few years, we've had 2 retirees in our department. One of them was the plumber, the one and only plumber. He had been here for almost 25 years. And so you can imagine how much knowledge he had in his position. Everything he learned was likely passed on to him from the person before, just word of mouth. They didn't, he had his little stash of documents with notes on it, but for the most part, we knew that the day that he was going to retire, there was going to be a lot of knowledge that was going to be left out there. We weren't going to have access to it. And then the other one was our mechanic. So we knew that we had to do something to be able to document all that information, get that out of his mind, and get it in a system, a format that, that anyone can access and that we can pass on to future generations working here. So fortunately we got in front of his retirement and did that. And I am just so thankful that we did so, because now I feel comfortable if something does break, I feel comfortable locating the shutoff valve and understanding the infrastructure on the campuses.
I remember you telling me a story about you were having to record some video and audio even before the guy left because, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've got 3 water wells on our main campus in Visalia. And the campus itself dates back to 1938. That's when we started the initial construction of it. 3 buildings were built. So there were 3 wells put in right around that time. And I knew when we were doing our walkthroughs, it's a loop system. So we're able to isolate certain areas by turning off or turning on certain valves in that system. There's probably a dozen valves on those lines. And I knew, I've been here for 7 years. And right when I started here, I said, man, this is the most confusing system I've ever seen. Because I do have access to 1938 site plans, the architectural set from those initial buildings. But so many things have happened since 1938 that were not accurately documented. And so what I did when we were out there walking around the site, our plumber knew that he would be retiring within the year. So he did help us out quite a bit by being willing to share all the information he had. We're walking around the site and there's 2 valves side by side and pulls the lids on them. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to start recording and just listen to what he says. And I'm not even videotaping him. I'm videotaping the ground or inside the lids in the ground, looking at the valves. And I'm just listening to him talk. So that I recorded that. And then I can take that recording, I can save it digitally so that we know anytime we could go back to that recording and say, oh, turn this one off, turn this one on, and it'll affect that area. So it's extremely useful.
Sure. I can only imagine, especially with all the tenure that guy had.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about finding qualified technicians. How are you finding that at your locations?
We haven't had too much difficulty finding qualified technicians in our area. And I think it's because of the fact that, our employer is very reputable in the area. So many, trade professionals such as, an HVAC technician or a plumber, they want to work for us. They know it's a great institution. We have a great operation. And then now that's word's getting out about how we in facilities operate, how organized we are. And, we're cutting edge. We're trying to do the latest and greatest. I think that's really a draw for getting new employees here.
No, that's great. So are you feeling that because of some of the things that you've implemented, you've really been a thought leader, but more importantly, it's almost a value add for getting people in?
I believe so. Yes. Before before we actually implemented any type of software, so to say, for documenting information about the site, we had, I think, our HVAC systems is where we were leading the industry in. And that was before the pandemic. That was prior to COVID. We've had UV lighting in place for since about 2006 or 2007.
Mhm.
And the iWave technology we actually implemented in December of 19. So
Wow.
COVID was around, but it wasn't official at that
Right.
point. And as soon as people found out that we had that, I realized, man, they're asking questions about it. And all of a sudden I realized we're an industry leader right now. People are coming to us to see what we're doing. And it made me feel really good. And then especially after implementing some software for documenting the rest of, our utilities, our infrastructure, our buildings, I really feel we're headed in the right direction.
No, that's fantastic to hear. And and again, I think that's important for people to realize too, is many are not in the same boat as you. Had conversations with, I can't tell you how many institutions, higher ed, K through 12, healthcare, manufacturing, where they're just kind of flailing, for lack of a better term, because they don't know what to do. And some of that is limited by the workforce that's coming in. There just aren't enough skilled trades in some areas or some markets to backfill those open positions. But I love hearing that you took proactive steps to capture that information and document that, because at the end of the day, that's a lot of institutional knowledge that just walks out that door.
It is, and it's taken a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time, and I'll tell you what, it's never ending. We've put countless hours into where, getting us to where we're at today. But I mean, when I started here 7 years ago, all we had was a stack of plans on top of, we had the flat files, and then we had rolls of plans on top of that.
Mhm.
And there were, the plans were labeled somewhat, but nothing was saved digitally. And I was just losing my mind when something would come up. I mean, my background's architecture. When something would come up on the site and there'd be a leak, our crew would be like, well, we don't know where this goes. We don't know where to shut it off. And I'm thinking, well, let's go to the plans. Let's pull the plans.
Mhm.
And I didn't have anything digitally. It would take me hours to just find the plan set, to look through it. And then you look through it and you realize, oh, shoot, this is the bid set. These aren't the as-bills. So you just go down a rabbit hole when you're trying to resolve these situations. And it took a few years, but we finally got everything digitized. And more importantly, we got it organized in a fashion that anyone can find what they need relatively quickly. I mean, within minutes, you're able to find an electrical panel on a building from 1938.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No,
The original
that's
drawings.
really great. That's really great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about new hires. So you've got a new person that starts. What does that process look like for you? And what are some of the technology benefits that you've seen that help get those new hires up to speed faster?
So what I've noticed is the new hires recently have been all about the technology. They're jumping all over this. They love the idea of the software that we have right now, and they're eager to add to it, which I love.
That's great.
I think it's more of the tenured folks that are having a little bit of difficulty trying to adapt to it and accept it. They have their ways and the knowledge is already in their mind, but that doesn't help the rest of us. So
Correct.
I mean, the new hires, it's no problem bringing them up to speed and getting them to use our systems and equipment.
I think part of the challenge is always, especially with the legacy folks who are within that retirement window, is like you said, they're stuck in their ways. This is the way I've always done it, and I'm not going to do something different. But then I think there's a switch that goes on when they realize that, wait a minute, this is a tool. This is something I can use for this other thing that was, pardon me, a pain in my butt before. Now they can use it for something else to kind of check off a box that's always been a pain to them. And in facilities, I think it's unique to other areas within an organization, because it's a moving target with you guys. Things are breaking all the time. Things are, you burn up a motor and you got to replace it. So things are changing all the time, but there's such a tremendous burden on you guys too from the health and safety aspect as well. But talk about what does that look like as far as you've got a new guy, like this is you and then one of your technicians in the picture here, but what does that look like when you've got a new hire, you got a skeleton crew as it is, and he's on or you're on site at Visalia and you've got to run over to Tulare and something's going sideways. What does that look like when you're not there, or that seasoned guy's not there and the new guy has to go over there? Role play that. What does that look like for that new person?
Well, that's the beauty of cloud-based technology and putting all the information we have, into that device. Yeah, that's actually our skilled maintenance worker right there, Luis. Fantastic guy. And what we're doing there, he doesn't work on the equipment. He doesn't work on the boiler. That all falls under, plumbing. So what we're doing there is I'm just showing them kind of what we've done, the how to find equipment, the information about the equipment, so that in the event that we don't have a plumber, we don't have access to the HVAC technician, I can call Luis anytime and he'd be comfortable pulling up the system, being able to troubleshoot an issue over in Tulare. And that goes for all of our staff. They have access to all this information. It's just teaching them how to utilize the software. And it really is very easy. If you organize it in the fashion that makes sense, it's very simple for anybody to pick it up and run with it.
I love what you just said there. Simple. At the end of the day, I'm a firm believer, and I've heard this over and over again. If it's not easy, they're not going to use it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's jump over here to how you find critical building equipment. So think about, you've got 62 buildings spread out over your 3 campuses, and you have 5 people, which is, kind of staggering trying to get your head around. You have 5 techs, to manage all those buildings, especially when they're spread out over all of those. But how do they know where everything's located?
Gosh, it really in the past has been by experience. And when I first started, my goal was to get very familiar with our plans, because I felt that was the only way I can really sit down and understand the makeup of buildings, the infrastructure, and finding out where all the equipment's at. And even in the process of us inventorying all this equipment, I started by pulling all of the mechanical plans for every single building to identify where air handlers are located. Any type of mechanical equipment, you name it. And so, yeah, it's experienced really before, but now that everything's documented, anybody can go in and be able to sort through and find, oh, here's the air handlers for building B in Tulare. Boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just anywhere across the district, and you could do it all digitally.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's interesting too is, I've heard this over and over as well, where they don't refer to them as builds, they call them nearly builds. and it's funny we say that, but the challenge is, has that equipment ever been field verified to verify what's really out there? And I was on site at a school just yesterday, and in Southern California, and the challenge that they had is they've had multiple renovations just in the last 2 years, and pumps have switched out. They've replaced split systems. They've just had a ton of stuff. And he said it was just so hard for them in the past to try to figure out what was where. And when I showed him, listen, you can map all this stuff out, and now you can see even photos. Here's make, model, serial number, all the information. And oh, by the way, like in this photo here with you, you can walk up to that unit there and scan a QR code that's on there and see everything for that piece of equipment. So what has that value been for you, and how has that been impacting? I mean, obviously with you carrying your iPad around, what does that look like for you?
Well, you're absolutely right. Excuse me, I got a coughing attack. Yeah, it's been extremely valuable. I'm able to walk up to any piece of equipment. I can scan a QR code, and all the information about that equipment is pulled up. And so the nice thing is, when we swap out equipment, I can update that tag, and that information is always current. In fact, anybody can walk up to it and hit the QR code, and it'll tell them information about the equipment. So yeah, it's extremely valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of the guy who's got to climb up that roof ladder, and he's got to go up that roof, climb up on that ladder, go up on the roof, figure out what belt size he needs or what filter he needs, then crawl back down that, and then crawl back down that ladder, and then go driving his truck over to grab the filters, then go back up there again, and oh shoot, I grabbed the wrong one, and oh yeah. But the ability to have all of that stuff so that those guys can actually have that field verified what's really out there, I think has always been a big plus.
It's funny you kind of bring that up, walking up and down the ladder, figure out what the belt size is and all that. Our before we had software to inventory all of this, our HVAC technician, he had his Google Doc spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet had a list of all the buildings, had a list of all the equipment, had the specs, had all that information on there, but it didn't identify locations. That's the most important part. Where do you find this? I have some information, but where do you find it? So tying the two together was fantastic.
Well, I always use the analogy. It's that one unit that's in that storage room that's tucked away in that closet back there that you need key 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to open. and I've been there for 5 years and didn't even know that closet existed.
Exactly.
That's the challenge, is understanding where the stuff is too. It's bad enough that something's going sideways. It's worse when you got to dig to try and find it to even go fix it.
Yeah.
So our next thing here is, let's talk about emergency preparedness and response. So we, unfortunately, the top bullet there is, for lack of a better term, has been the forefront of what we've seen recently, and that's it. The tragedies that have been happening around the country are just unfathomable to me. But also the sharing that information with first responders so that they can respond faster. Also, remote and offline access to building information, water leaks, electrical out, all the other stuff that happens on a site every day, not just the active shooter things that happen. And unfortunately, they've been happening recently too frequently, but it's all the day-to-day stuff too. So talk a little bit about emergency preparedness and response and how that's impacted you.
We have an emergency preparedness program, response program, and district police. We have our own district police on campus here that serves all 3 campuses. We work closely with them in communicating any type of emergency equipment or information about the building. And in this inventory process that we've done, I keep mentioning inventory because that is huge for this process. We have been able to document photos of the interior of all of our rooms so that in the event of emergency, I could be anywhere. I could be over at the coast. I like to go to the coast. I could be over at the coast. There could be something going on here, and I could have the chief of police here saying, "Hey, what does it look like inside room or inside the Alta Peak building, room 203?" Well, I can hop on my device, pull up a picture, and there'll be 4 views of the room, every single wall, and different perspectives from each corner. And I can just text that screenshot or share that photo directly with first responders. We could do the same with floor plans. We could do the same with fire alarm panels, pull stations, security cameras. All that information can be easily accessed via software and communicated to anybody within minutes.
That's awesome. I mean, it's how it goes in an emergency. You're not thinking straight. So I always tell folks, you gotta be able to respond and not make people dig. Again, it's all about time. Time in an emergency is not on our side. I know you had mentioned to me at one point in one of our previous conversations about where you've had to respond to something and you're sitting at home at night. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, fire alarm panels are usually the ones that keep you up at night, or the ones that wake you up at night. And what's nice is, our first responders is usually district police. They may show up, and if they, when they show up, if they don't have knowledge of the panel, don't know how to use the panel as far as what buttons to push. We have pictures of all of our alarm panels inside, the manuals for them, and I can access that on my phone. Just wake up in the middle of the night, look at it on my phone. I can screenshot the directions to them. This is how you use it. They are posted next to the panel, but sometimes, those disappear. or the panel's locked, or there's always something going on, that could go wrong when responding. But within our device, we do have all the information to be able to communicate it to somebody on site. And it may not even be district police. It could be a custodian working on the weekend. They normally don't touch fire alarm panels, but they're on site and they can help if we're remote.
Well, and I'm hearing a common theme from you is it's identified, the locations are identified, and knowing exactly where this stuff is so you can share that. I think at the end of the day too is field verification and knowing what the heck is where. It sounds like it's critical, as especially to colleges, schools, but everywhere. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, doesn't matter what building you're in, is if I've got to respond to something, whether it's a general maintenance thing or I've got to respond to an emergency, is knowing where something is so I can go do that. That's critical. And mapping out equipment locations, mapping out shutoffs, mapping out all the critical stuff within that building, and then having it accessed by even the new guy who just started a week ago, or the police department, in your case, that they're not walking every room of every building all the time. So my dad's a first responder. He just retired from being a first responder for 50 years. And he said to me a long time ago, he said, I don't know what's on the other side of that door. I may have not even been in that building before. So I don't know what I'm up against when I walk through that doorway. And I think this really can open up some of that, and sharing that information with those first responders really is a game changer for them.
It was actually the local fire department that initiated this whole idea for us about 4 years ago. They dropped by the site and they asked us to put together a cohesive emergency response map that identified all of our shutoffs. And in the past, we didn't have everything consolidated in one map. Our electrician had his own map for electrical panels, switchgear, etc. Plumber had his information up in his brain. That didn't help. And then, all the different shutoffs, gas were in certain spots. But we worked with the local fire department and put together a cohesive map. And then now we've taken it even further to where that, I actually saved that map on my phone to begin with. It was saved on my phone, and that was my only reference in case something happened at night. I could tell someone, oh, go in this building, in this room, and you'll see the fire alarm panel location. But that led us to actually posting fire alarm panel inside, a red tag sign that is on the front of the door, so that if you walk around the building, you'll see the red sign and where the fire alarm panel goes. One thing we had an issue with, though, was sometimes the fire alarm panel may be in one building, but that fire alarm panel may feed multiple buildings. So you got to keep that in mind when you're documenting information like that. You'll have to put notes with it so that when someone says, oh, you can pull it up digitally on your phone, fire alarm panel is over here in this building. Oh, this also feeds these other buildings. Good to know.
Yeah, that I can imagine that would be critical.
Yeah.
So let's talk about stop changing my slide for me. There we go. So maintaining and updating that building information. So I know you had mentioned to me before that you have multiple renovations going on all the time. Now you're in the middle of summer projects as well. You talked about some of the new construction, but you had mentioned to me and also we've got equipment upgrades here, but you had mentioned to me an issue with you were digging up or you were tearing down an older building, and you said that you guys found some underground piping and some underground utilities that gave you fits for a little bit, trying to figure out what went to where. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have a building under construction right now. It's a single story. It's called the Educational Support Services Building, 21,000 square feet, single story. And it just replaced, we tore down one of the original 1938 buildings and are building in the same location. And so you can imagine what that was like during demolition and what we uncovered around the building. This particular story that I had told you in the past was there was a gas line that was just outside of that building footprint, and we could not figure out how to shut it off. And then once we finally disconnected it, we realized, oh, we just turned off the building next to it. And we're thinking, how in the world could this happen? That's not right, because there's a gas valve outside the building next to it, and that one controls that building. Come to find out, there was a regulator buried in the ground. I mean, there was a vault on the south side of the building next to us, and the line we just took out fed that regulator. We didn't even mark this, Dave, when we went and did our walk. Like, we had none of our staff had any idea that was how we turned the gas off to that building. We just assumed that the lid in front was the gas shut off because that's what the plumber said. That was wrong. And so what we ended up doing was actually getting into our documents. We identified the original gas valve. We said this is abandoned, abandoned in place, left open, does not work. And then we identified the new shut off for the building. So it was quite a learning process.
But you guys were able to document that. So now moving forward, everybody's got it.
We were able to document it, but it took probably a good 6 hours of troubleshooting. Wow. Trying to figure out where the gas came into that building next to us and why we shut it off in the first place. It was just a mess. I mean, I'm digging back through the 1938 plans. I'm digging back through the building next to it. I think it was built in the 60s. It was an auto shop and wood shop building. And I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find any information on that. And then we found a lid, pulled a lid, and sure enough, there was a regulator underneath.
Wow.
So
unbelievable. But I'm sure that's stuff with, especially with some of your campus, obviously being 90 plus years old, there's going to be stuff like that you're going to run into.
No doubt. Yeah. In fact, I think even more important than emergency response, I think I use this information, this digital information, cloud-based technology. I use it more for everyday items such as, maintenance issues. Mm-hmm. And even all of our construction projects. I'll have the contractor out there and he'll ask me, where's the electrical lines go? And you would think it'd all be on the plans, but sometimes it's deeper than that. You want to know secondary impacts. And if you have all of your plans scanned in, digitized, and easily accessible on your phone or your device, you can stand right there on the site and say, oh yeah, we did a remodel 10 years ago and they rerouted the electrical lines this way. So it's priceless. If you would have seen me 6 years ago, I was stressing.
Ripping your hair out, I'm sure.
I have the gray hair now, a little bit of gray hair. I'm getting there, but yeah, I feel so much more better, so much more comfortable having all of our plans that I'm aware of digitized.
No, it's funny you're talking about projects, and I always, when I talk to clients and I teach education sessions at conferences all the time, and one of the first things that I bring up is, you've got a new construction project or a major renovation on one of your buildings. What drawings do you give your contractors? And I get this blank stare. And it's well, I give them the most recent stuff I can find. I'm like, well, that's great, but you're not giving them all the historical stuff that shows all the other changes between the walls, where they moved plumbing, 10 years before that, or they moved a whole bunch of other stuff 5-6 years before that, or even 20 years before that. And the unique thing I think is interesting is you literally see the architect or the GC or any of the engineering firms or trades, when they realize that they can have access to all the historical stuff that happened on the building they're getting ready to demo, they drool, because they know that they're going to go spend 2 days, a week in a plan room trying to find stuff to do their job. But being able to give access to that information is just so critical, especially when you're doing renovations. But even in your case, like you just brought up with the new construction project, where you're ripping something down to build over something that was old, it also helps you find that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, and you got to be careful, because the architects, if they're working on an old site and this is their first time on the site, they will make assumptions. They're going to ask as many questions as they can. They're going to gather all the old plans. But if it's not clear in the plans, if there's a gap, they may make it, it'll be vague on the plans. They'll make an assumption, and you're not going to be able to figure it out until demo. It's simple as that. You can get the ground surveyed, the ground penetrating radar, you do all that, but you're going to find some unknowns underground. And it's just a matter of how quickly you can resolve it with the contractor once the shovel's in the ground. And fortunately for us, I think the contractor was amazed that we had information right there in the palm of our hand. They've never seen that before.
Right. Well, they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And I think what you run into, especially what you just described there with the architect, they are going to make some assumptions. Well, to me, what that means is assumptions mean change orders for unforeseen conditions. They don't know what they don't know. So when they make that assumption and it's wrong, who pays that bill?
Exactly. If this is going to delay the contractor's demolition process,
yeah,
ultimately it's going to cost me money.
That's right. That's right. And there's your contingency budget right there.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny because even on projects, I've heard, oh my gosh, I've heard horror stories with contingency budgets. I've heard as much as 40% on a project total cost. They've got set aside for contingencies for that because they don't have plans. They don't even have the bid sets, let alone the as-built or nearly built, to start with. So there's such an unknown when you don't have all that information in one spot that everybody can see. So let's talk about next year. I can get my slide to change here. Hold on one second. There we go. So let's talk about some facilities teams and innovative technology. We've danced around, some of the different things that you're doing, Byron, but let's talk about some of the specifics that you've been doing on your team. And that's the right technologies puts the plan room in your pocket. Everybody has access to that. So you talked a little bit about this image here kind of illustrates what you were talking before, where you used to have plans in flat files, and then you had rolls on top of the flat files and stuff. But is this kind of a day in the life of what you were talking about?
That's similar. And I don't want it to seem like we have everything figured out over here and there's no more messes in the plan room. We've digitized everything, but there's still work to be done to be able to perfect everything.
Sure.
But yeah, that is kind of what I faced my first day of work here.
Yeah, and managing that is, especially when you've got a constant moving target. I look at these roles here and I always say each one of those roles is a new project. So you're in the middle of summer projects here. So adding that information in there is going to be key, obviously, moving forward, but having access to that stuff and having it in a, for lack of a better term, it's a master set of drawings where everybody can tie into.
But it's more important. It's how you organize it. I mean,
Right.
all of our projects, they're organized by building.
Sure.
And so I have a list of all my buildings. And then within that, I have every single project by year. So then I can go and I can find the most recent project, work my way back. And then a collective site. There's a site folder with all the site related projects too. So,
you and I we've talked about this multiple times on the value of not just, especially with your sites and having even an agricultural site where you've got the land, not just the buildings. We've talked about the challenges with the stuff between the buildings, not just the stuff inside the building. So talk a little bit about that.
Majority of our problems happen between buildings. It's not within the building itself. And if you think about it, it's generally easy to isolate a building, to turn things off on a building. But for example, like the example I gave you about the water wells on the Visalia campus, I don't know how many thousands of feet of water wells or water lines there are in that well loop. But we had what was it, about 2 years ago, we had a leak on the main line. And we could not figure out how to shut this thing off. It was not on the well, actually. I take that back. It was not on the well. It was a main water line. And we couldn't find a single inline valve to isolate that leak. Looked everywhere. I looked through plans right and left. And ultimately, we had to shut the campus down and do an overnight repair. We didn't have a choice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But like I said, it's always, for us, the issues are in between the buildings. It's in the site infrastructure and utilities. So it doesn't always fall in the plan set. It's between the projects.
Sure.
So what we've gone, you don't have a slide here showing it, but what we've gone is we've actually pinned an aerial campus map, and it's just everything's color coded. There are hundreds of dots locating everything from inline valves to shut off valves at buildings to, and that's for water. That could be gas, it could be irrigation, quick couplers, hose bibs, sewer cleanouts, manholes, storm drains, you name it, all of that is color coded on the site. And then so now when you see those dots, you can start to connect the dots and you know, okay, well, this manhole, this storm drain ties to this manhole, and you have a good idea of, you know, how the infrastructure is routed on your site.
No, and that's I think key is you're not digging. You're not, you know,
Right.
your guys aren't wandering around the campus blind. You've got it mapped out as to where things are.
Yeah. And of course, the next step is to do more of like a one line in AutoCAD. But initially you have to at least see all of the surface information first before you can start connecting the dots.
Sure. So look, let's talk about the screen here that you can see that says, you know, you've got your pinning and mapping of equipment for easy access on your mobile devices. Now, you're talking about phones and tablets, correct?
Yeah, phones and tablets. So this is actually a picture of the Kern building floor plan on the first floor there. So what we've done, as I mentioned earlier, is color coded everything. So green is related to custodial. Yellow is related to mechanical. Black is technology, and then the purple is finishes. That's just kind of a catch-all. And then you'll see some blue pins in there, blue dots for water. But again, it's inventory. So what we're doing here from a mechanical standpoint, you see all the yellow dots with the T's, those are the thermostat locations. The green with the DW, you can kind of see it's a little faded up at the top, but it's custodial disinfecting wipes. So we have, I can just, within a click, I can pull up a building floor plan and I can see how many disinfecting wipe dispensers are in the building. The C is a clock. Our custodians are responsible for changing the clocks when the time changes, changing the batteries out of them. So they can pull up the floor plan and they know exactly how many batteries they're going to need when they do their runs. But going back to the purple finishes button, and you'll see a blown up version on the right there, an enlarged version. This is what I was talking about earlier about the photographs inside the room. So what we've done is we've taken different views of the room. In addition to photographs, we've also uploaded some videos. So I'll actually walk along the wall with the video, taking a video so I can see where the outlets, both electrical and data outlets, are located. So when I'm doing a project in the future, if they want to remodel the room, I'll pull the pin up, pull the video up, and I can say, okay, well, and I can kind of scale it too as I'm going. I know there's 2 data outlets located over here. There's one, you know, power here, and it just saves me a trip from walking all the way across campus into that room. You'll see different fields there for description, equipment forms. We're starting to put anything and everything about that room into this pin, whether it's the light fixtures, the ceiling tile finish, our paint colors on the walls, the type of carpet that's in there. And it could be also information. When was that installed? You know, when was the carpet installed? When was it painted last? So it is inventorying every single thing about that room, and it's constantly updated as we do updates to the projects.
You know, I'm working with a client right now, and he used a real world example. We just mapped out all of his equipment, all of his electrical panels, and one of the things that they're doing, it's a hospital. They've got every panel in, or I'm sorry, every outlet has the panel name on the outlet itself in the circuit. So he actually had an incident happen while I was there, and he says, "Listen, I'm trying to find the electrical panel for this particular." It was in the OR. They had one of their outlets went out and they lost power. Well, for a hospital, that's, you know, $20,000 a day if that room's, or if that OR's down. So time is of the essence. So he said, "Well, I know here's the circuit, here's the panel name that's on the little sticker that's on the plate on that outlet, but I don't know where that panel is." I said, "Do a search for just the panel name." He did a search for the panel name, and it showed him exactly where the panel was, in what room and on what wall of that room. And it was in one of their main electrical rooms, so the floor down below where he was. He said, "Oh my gosh." He said, "I had something that happened just like that not even a week ago, and I spent an hour and a half trying to find that panel." And I'm thinking to myself, how much money did they lose with rescheduling? And not just the money, it's the inconvenience for the patients as well. But how much time they lost because he couldn't find the panel. I mean, that's what you're talking about here. It's all the stuff in a space. So you got photos here of the room. You talked about videoing that. You can document all of that stuff depending on what your needs are. And I think that's what's key here is to be flexible, to be able to do that for the things that are unique for everybody else's specific facilities as well.
Well, think about if I have one full-time skilled maintenance worker for the entire district. If he gets a call from Tulare or work order from Tulare saying that there's a stained ceiling tile, he could pull up a picture of the room and he could see exactly what ceiling tile he needs to take out there. Or which one he's dealing with. If it's something special, it's a 2x2, a 2x4, or whatever type it is. This would be my first stop when I get an information or a concern about something over in Hanford or Tulare. I typically go to the app and then I can see, okay, well, this is what I'm up against, just to give me a hint of before I head out there and see if I can take anything with me before I make the trek out 20 miles away.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that too is even when your example there, if you got a stained tile, you pop that ceiling tile and you're on that ladder. And while you're there, you're fixing, you're not just replacing the tile. I poke my head up there and I find an isolation valve. I can take my phone out of my pocket and document that isolation valve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's never ending.
Right. Right. Well, and that's the goal. I mean, obviously you want it to be evergreen because as your team finds stuff, they rip open a wall, they're fixing something. They rip open a wall, they find stuff. To be able to document that in the field, I think is huge.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about, I'll get my slide to change here. There we go. Let's talk about what that would look like. So imagine you click on an iPad and you click on an app and then you click on a location. Okay. And I want to see all the drawings for this part of this building. And I can see here's all the drawings. I can zoom in, I can select a drawing set. But what this shows though is what drawings touched that part of the building. So I'm not flipping through hundreds of plan sets trying to figure out what drawings touch, this southeast corner of that room 202 or whatever the room number you're going into. I can see there's 3 plan sets that touch there. I'm going to start with the most recent because it's by date and then what that renovation was. That's what we're talking about, is tracking down what you need to do your job in minutes on your phone or your tablet or your desktop, wherever the heck you are, you can access that. But then let's talk about equipment. So you've got something going on with your equipment in the building. And again, same thing. Click on an app. You've got all the equipment in here. You hit the QR code button. You scan a QR code on the actual machine, whatever that is, and it pulls up all the information for that machine. You've got your O&M, you've got parts, you've got specs, you've got whatever it is, belt sizes, you've got your filter sizes, everything like Byron said. Before you even leave the maintenance department, before you even leave the desk, you know exactly what you need to run out there. Okay. And then when you're there, you can scan it and you can update stuff as you make changes. And I cannot stress that enough. I'm standing in front of the unit and I can change stuff or add notes so everybody sees what you need to do to fix this thing, whatever that thing is. Again, it's real time, so everybody has access. But then again, when something's going sideways in the building, where's the shutoff? So again, click on the app, drill down into the buildings and be able to find the shutoffs by clicking a shutoff button. All right. And then you can see all the shutoffs. Well, here's the water shutoff. Click on it. And you can see there's a backflow here. And you can see the photo and you can have photos. You can have videos attached. How do you shut this off? I've had many clients that will walk around and map out with video, with their plumber, with their electrician, and videotape because they've got something funky with that part of that particular thing. It could be equipment, it could be a shutoff, it could be anything. They could say, you need this particular tool to turn that on or off. But having access to that stuff wherever I am, I'm on a roof, I'm in a plan room, I'm wherever, I'm in a basement, having access to that stuff all over the place, wherever I'm at. And that's what's key here. So let's take some Q&A. I'm going to turn our cameras on here, Byron, and let's take some questions from the field.
Yes, we've been getting in a few questions. Just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions for David or Byron, please send those in as in the Q&A chat. Let's get to a few of them right now. Somebody wrote in, I love to see what you've done. It's cool to see how quickly you're able to access from the iPad. There's a lot of work to get the photos and pin into the floor plan. How and who did this for you? How many people did you employ, and how long did it take to get to this current stage?
I'll field the first part of that. Our team physically went out on site and did site walks and mapped out the equipment, mapped out the emergency equipment. We did all of that upfront legwork. I think that was a big deal because at the end of the day, your teams are running around fixing stuff. Now, from that, we set that baseline of all of that information and got it all into the system. And there were a handful of, depending on the size of the engagement, we'll send out multiple people or multiple teams to document that. But Byron's expanded on that. I know, Byron, talk a little bit about what you've done, especially with this stuff between the buildings to document that.
This is what it looks like.
I love the visual.
There are hundreds of them.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of it, it's all about timing. We had a maintenance manager that started about a year and a half ago, and he was gung-ho about this too. And him and I, we just take a couple hours a day, every couple weeks, and we would just look at the app and say, okay, well, we finished this area. Let's go and start making our way around the site. So I think that it's probably taken, it's hard to quantify it because it's been over a year and we're still not done. So if you had someone, I can't quantify because I don't know what your site looks like, but it really doesn't take that long once you get going. Once you establish kind of your formatting standards, what you want to see, it's systematic. You walk up to a shut-off valve, drop a pin. It's just like dropping a pin on a map on your iPhone or something. Drop a pin, put a title in there, take 2 pictures, you're done. You move on to the next one. So it doesn't take that long at all.
Well, like Byron said too, these are all the additional things too. I know with our team, we mapped out all of this mechanical equipment. We did the baseline of all the shutoffs as well. You've gone back in and mapped out sewer and all, you know, obviously finishes and things like that. But it's so easy to document that, like Byron said, and you know, you don't want this thing to be static. Your buildings are not static. Things change all the time. So as your buildings change, having the ability to swap stuff out and change it, I think is key, because then everybody's on the same page.
Perfect. This is the question, are you able to integrate this kind of software with an existing work order system or other software systems?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it really depends on ours. We're open API, so our system will communicate with other systems. What it really comes down to is, will the other systems talk back? Many times what I've seen is clients will run parallel, because if your CMMS has a mobile app too, we're a mobile app as well. We also can access on the browser, but at the end of the day, when your team's out in the field, how many mobile apps do you have open at one time? Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. You're literally toggling between them. But the important thing is to make sure that the stuff matches and you're not duplicating work. Okay, and I cannot stress that enough. You have to identify, this is what my CMMS does, which is my work orders, PMs, and things like that. But work order systems aren't out there mapping out where the stuff is. So we actually export out the database and import it into our system so everything matches up, even the asset tags, serial numbers, everything matches up. So if you're looking at one, they match. And as you make changes, again, I'm all about don't duplicate work. And ours is modular based. So depending on what modules you get, depends on what that use case might be for you.
Perfect. This is probably a question more for Byron. Byron, you mentioned your plumber, that you had to take the knowledge out of his brain. If you had to do it again, what kind of timeline would you give yourself to try to document some of that knowledge?
Ooh,
that's a great question.
That's a good question. I recognized it soon after I started. So let's see, he retired about a year ago. So I had a good 6 years with him. And I knew when I started, I was like, this, you know, it's just a matter of time. And it's not just that. It could be anybody. They could hit the lottery tomorrow and they're gone.
Yeah.
But with the hard thing about the plumber, he can walk around and tell you where all the shutoffs are and what does what. but you'll get a freak accident every now and then where you'll have a leak somewhere over here and you'll be like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you this does that. So it would take, it's the experiences that are really, you're going to learn the most in experiences. So it's not like you can just walk around and get all the information, but it also goes back to kind of the previous question that I answered. It has to do with your site, your facility, and how much infrastructure you have related to plumbing. But I would give yourself, we really dug deep with him for about 3 months, and it wasn't every day, but in 3 months span, he kind of knew I'm retiring at the end of December. What do you want out of me? So.
But I think what's interesting about that too, Byron, and again, it's hard to put a timeline, an exact timeline, but I always go back to, what does it mean when he leaves? If you haven't planned and you haven't started, he leaves, he's going to give you notice. I had one guy that I actually talked to, and he has their huge university. They had one elevator guy, okay, on staff. All right. And he came into his boss's office. He'd been there for 20 years, 25 years. And he sat down in his boss's office and says, listen, I'm retiring. I'm giving you 6 months, but I'm going to retire. And the boss is thinking, oh, this is great. I've got 6 months with this guy. 6 months out of 20, he's been there 25 years. You got only 6 months to get that stuff out of his head. But let's compound that. Here's what he said. He said, I'm going to give you 2 options. I'm going to give you 3 months and I'm going to leave, or I'll give you 6 months and I'm still moving to Utah and I will come back 2 weeks a month for 6 months. And you're going to pay me all for 6 months though. So what do you think he went with? Option B, because he had 6 months. But like you said, Byron, you don't know. I mean, the guy could hit the lottery tomorrow and he's like, I'm out, but at the end of the day, time, I always say this when it comes to the time questions, it's what are you waiting for? It's coming, it's coming. And what are you waiting for? And what's the benefit of waiting? There's zero benefit of waiting because that clock doesn't stop running.
Perfect. Another question on what have you seen more successful with allowing the team to use the mobile devices? Do you allow them to select their own device, use their own personal device? Everybody gets the same exact device. David and Byron, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it really is varied from client to client. I've seen the most success is when the client will actually supply iPads. Many of our clients don't supply phones. They'll have their personal phones. And a lot of the text, because again, they look at it as a tool to make their life easier, they'll go ahead and load it on their phones. But Byron held up his iPad. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients I've walked into their office and there's a row of iPads sitting there on charging stations, and they've got a generic login for each one of those. And I mean, once they're logged in, it doesn't matter. You grab, number 1 or number 10, it doesn't matter. And they take it out in the field, and then they've got it when they need it. But I've heard, again, the most success I've seen has been when it's client supplied devices.
Perfect. We have a question regarding if there's an average range of efficiency gains, response time, wasting time looking for info that your clients or Byron that you've seen, or is there any kind of efficiency rate that you can put on that, David?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to quantify the number. I don't know. I mean, I would say what I've heard is clients have said between 20 and 40%. They're not spending, on average, we've seen in the industry studies that people are spending between an hour and 2 hours, either not just looking through paper and looking through digital files trying to find something to do their job. It's, I just spent 30 minutes, but I had to drive back and forth from the field, 4 times to try and find the stuff that I needed. Or I spent 3 hours in a plan room someplace trying to dig and find something, or I spent 3 days in a plan room. I mean, it really is, it depends on the client and what they've got. Obviously, a brand new building isn't going to have as much stuff as like Byron's 90-year-old building, or even a hospital will traditionally have more than a school. But Byron, what have you seen on your team?
I think it depends on how much activity you have on your site. So how much construction is going on, remodeling, because you can look at it two ways. You could use it as an emergency response tool. You know, if there's an emergency and we need to go shut something off, we can get the iPad out and figure out where something's at. Or you can use it like me every day with all of our construction projects. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm out in the field at the project and the inspector might have a question, and I'll just pull the plans up right there on the iPad. We could look at it together. I can mark something up, screenshot it, text it to the contractor if we need to, or the architect, whoever's involved, without having to go back to the job trailer and all huddle around a big set of plans. You can see it, you know, a window detail right there when you're next to the window. So I don't doubt you quantifying it 25 to 40%. I would say I'm much more productive, and it's a mobile office, really, if you think about it.
Yeah,
that's great.
I think we have time for one last question that just came through. Byron, you were kind of mentioning some of the different team members on your team and some of the points on the plans, like custodial, electrical, plumbing.
Yeah.
Do they all have access to that? Can they sort through it based on their job function, so that they don't have to see all of the information?
Yes. So that I actually jotted some notes down about the importance of organization, organizing. I mentioned color coding. Something that comes to mind is this particular software, the Arc Facilities app. It sorts alphabetically when you're listing things. So something you got to consider is when you name, you're calling out custodial items, you'll want to say custodial dash disinfectant wipe dispenser, custodial dash clock, water dash booster pump, water dash shut off valve. So that when you're sorting, all the custodials grouped together, all the water's grouped together, you can turn off everything and then only turn on custodial. So we pinned everything and I named it different. I realized, oh shoot, I can't change this. Start over. It's worth it in the long run. And we finally figured out a format that made the most sense to be able to isolate the trades.
What I loved about what you did too, Byron, I know when we were talking about this a while ago, is assigning the color to each one of the departments. But then you can have, so say for instance, IT is black, okay? You can have 50 or 100 pins that are just IT related, and then turn them on and off depending on what they specifically want to see. They want to see all the data closets, or they want to see all of the, I don't know, data ports, whatever. They want to see all of that stuff. They can sort it by that and just see those things in a particular space, a floor, a room, a building, or whatever, because our system actually uses tags, meta tags, that actually pulls information, but it's all searchable. So if I'm IT and I want to see all the data closets, I can search for data closet and it will find every pin in every building, and you click on it and it actually zooms in and shows you exactly where that particular room is. And you can click on the pin and see all the information, the videos attached, the photos, all the notes, all of that in. And we're talking on my phone in a second. I can search for it and boom, there it is.
I think our staff, the maintenance staff, just to answer the question, I missed it. The maintenance staff have access to everything. They have the iPads. The managers all have the iPads. Maintenance is probably the main users of the software. Grounds loves the idea, but they're not going to be pulling their phone out when their hands are all muddy and they're fixing sprinkler heads. So typically they'll call me if they have a question about the routing of a utility or something, and I'll come out to the site, or the manager, our maintenance manager, will come out to the site with his iPad, and we're right there and they're looking at it with us. Because typically we uncover something and we want to update the information. And then custodial, they have access. Anybody can have access to the app. It's just a matter of whether or not they feel they need it or want it. Typically custodial will just give me a call when they have an issue, and I pull up the app and it can screenshot something to them.
Perfect. Well, we are out of time. I wanted to give both Byron and David a chance to give some final thoughts to the audience, but we appreciate all the information you've provided today.
Yep.
But Byron, do you want to start with any final thoughts for the audience?
Sure. Yeah, I just like to say I'm extremely passionate about the idea of this, digitizing information about your facilities, making it easy to access. When I first started, it was, I had to figure out, how am I going to do this? I don't have software to do it. I'd use Dropbox and label files, but then you're searching through and it doesn't pin locations. You just have access to plan sets. And so, yeah, I came across this software. I met Dave a few years ago and I'm like, that's what I need. I need something like that. And I'm not just promoting ARC, but ARC is one of the only ones that I've seen that has this. And I really enjoy having this software and using it on a daily basis.
Wonderful. David, any final thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot stress this enough. This is not hard. This is an easy process, but you got to get started because you've got a bunch of people on your team that have a bunch of stuff in their heads, and you've got to capture that. It's not just the retiring people, but it's also the folks who are coming in that are those new hires. You have to be able to capture this because the goal, obviously, you want everybody to be on the same page. This is how you do it. And this is your move forward plan to capture all of those changes moving forward.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you again, both Byron and David, for some great information.
Pleasure.
And I'm sure we've seen some comments on great presentation, and thank you. So I'm sure you've got some of our facility managers tuning in today, their wheels spinning on what they're capable in their facilities.
Great.
Just a reminder, we are sending out an email to our CEUs for participating in this event. And then ARC will also be sending out an email with the archive. So if you'd like to rewatch this or send it to somebody on your team, watch for an email for the archived presentation. But thank you again for spending some time with us today. Thank you to ARC Facility for sponsoring today's webcast. And we look forward to seeing you at a future FacilitiesNet webcast. Have a great day, everyone.